Picture this. It's Berlin, 1947. The city is 95 million cubic meters of rubble. You walk past a bakery, and a single loaf of bread costs 800 Reichsmarks. But you don't pay with marks. You pay with 8 American cigarettes. Germany, once a mighty industrial power, had collapsed into a barter economy. The official money in people's pockets was worth less than the paper it was printed on. Yet just 12 months later, that same bakery window would be overflowing with bread, sausages, and cakes. The black market would vanish. The German economic miracle would begin. So how do you rebuild an entire nation when its money is completely, totally broken? To understand the miracle of 1948, you have to understand the nightmare of 1947. At the end of the war, Germany was flooded with currency. The amount of Reichsmarks had exploded by 600%, but the amount of goods to buy had collapsed. By 1947, industrial output was only a third of what it was in 1938. This is textbook hyperinflation. Too much money chasing too few goods. The Allies tried to stop it with strict price controls, but it didn't work. It just made the official money useless. Why sell a cooking pot for the legal price of 10 marks when you could illegally trade it for 5 pounds of potatoes? Money stopped being a store of value. It stopped being a medium of exchange. The entire German economy moved underground. But humans need to trade. So they found a new money: cigarettes. American GIs became the new central bank. A single cigarette was the base unit of value. A pack of cigarettes was worth a day's labor. A carton of 200 could get you a suit. On the black market, a pound of coffee cost either 2,500 Reichsmarks or 100 cigarettes. People posted ads in newspapers listing prices in cigarettes, not marks. Think about that. Your money was flammable, consumable. And if you were a smoker, you were literally burning your savings. This system was incredibly inefficient. You couldn't build a factory with cigarettes. Germany was stuck. Then came the hunger winter of 1946-47, one of the coldest in a century. The transport system collapsed. Food couldn't get to the cities. Official rations dropped to just over 1,000 calories a day, half the UN's minimum for survival. People were starving, not because there was no food, but because the system to move it was broken. Farmers refused to sell their crops for worthless paper money. Workers in the cities were too weak to show up to factories. Industrial absenteeism hit 40%. The economy wasn't just stalling, it was dying. The Allies knew this couldn't last. But Germany was divided into 4 occupation zones, and they couldn't agree on a solution. The Soviets were even printing their own Reichsmarks, making inflation worse. So the Western Allies decided to act alone. They hatched a secret plan called Operation Bird Dog. 23,000 wooden crates marked doorknobs were shipped from the U.S. to Frankfurt. They didn't contain doorknobs. They contained 10.7 billion units of a brand new currency, the Deutsche Mark. But printing new money isn't enough. You also need a plan. And that plan came from one man, Ludwig Erhard, the director of economics for the combined U.S. and U.K. zones. Erhard was an economist who hated price controls. He believed in the free market. His Allied counterparts were terrified. They thought lifting price controls would cause even more chaos and ordered him to keep them. Erhard agreed, and then planned to do the exact opposite. Sunday, June 20th, 1948. The plan was announced on the radio. Every German citizen could go to a bank, turn in 60 of their old worthless Reichsmarks, and receive 40 new Deutsche Marks in return. A month later, they got another 20. That was it. 60 new marks per person. But what about savings? What about corporate bank accounts? This is the brutal part. All old currency was declared void. Savings and debts were recalculated at a rate of 10 Reichsmarks to 1 Deutsche Mark. But then, half of that new amount was frozen and later cancelled. The effective conversion rate was 100 Reichsmarks to just 6.50 Deutsche Marks. This was a 93.5% destruction of savings. It wiped out speculators, hoarders, and almost everyone's internal debt. It was the hardest economic reset in modern history. But that was only half the plan. The other half was Erhard's big gamble. On that same Sunday, without permission from the Allied governors, he went on the radio and announced that 90% of all price controls were immediately abolished. Food, consumer goods, industrial parts, All prices were now set by the free market. General Lucius Clay, the American governor, was furious. He summoned Erhard and said, "My advisors tell me what you have done is a terrible mistake." Erhard famously replied, "General, pay no attention to them. My advisors tell me the same thing." The gamble was set, and then came Monday, June 21st. For 3 years, shop windows in German cities had been empty. On this one Monday morning, they were full. Suddenly there was bread, vegetables, tools, shoes, and pots. Where did it all come from? It hadn't been created overnight. It had been hoarded. Farmers and producers had been holding back years of goods, refusing to sell them for worthless Reichsmarks. The moment a new, stable currency existed, they put everything up for sale. The black market vanished in 24 hours. Cigarettes went from being money back to just being cigarettes. This Wirtschaftswunder, or economic miracle, wasn't a miracle for everyone. If you were a saver, you were destroyed. Your life savings of 100,000 Reichsmarks, once a fortune, became just 6,500 Deutsche Marks. But if you owned real assets, factories, property, commodities, you were a king. Your assets kept their value, but your debts were erased. The reform heavily favored owners of capital over owners of currency, creating massive new social inequality, and prices did jump. With controls gone, the cost of living shot up 14% in a few months. Unemployment spiked from 3% to over 11% by 1950 as weak companies finally went bankrupt. There were riots. Erhard's office was pelted with eggs, but he held his nerve, and it worked. The new stable money gave people a reason to work. Workers showed up to factories because their wages meant something. Industrial production, which was at 33% of pre-war levels in 1947, jumped to 75% just 1 year after the reform. Now, many people think the Marshall Plan started this. That's a common misconception. The Marshall Plan provided crucial aid, but it stabilized the miracle. It didn't start it. The miracle started on June 20th, 1948, with the restoration of trust in money. From 1950 to 1960, the West German economy grew at an average of 8% per year. Unemployment fell to just 1.2%. The country went from rubble to the second largest economy on Earth. So what's the real lesson? Germany rebuilt its economy not without money, but by destroying its old money and replacing it with real money. Money isn't just paper. It's a social contract. It's a collective belief that the thing in your hand will be worth something tomorrow. The Reichsmark broke that contract. The cigarette was an inefficient replacement. The Deutsche Mark restored it. The 1948 reform wasn't just economic, it was psychological. It proved that even if a nation is physically destroyed, if you can restore trust in the currency, people will show up to work on Monday and start rebuilding. The miracle is what happens when people finally have a reason to stop hoarding and start producing. This brings us back to today. We live in an era of massive currency creation and high government debt. The German story shows a hard reset is possible, but it's brutal. It wiped out 93.5% of all savings. So here's my question for you. Do you think our current system can be fixed gently, or does it eventually require a hard reset like Germany's 1948 reform? Drop your prediction in the comments below, and make sure to subscribe, because next we're going to cover the countries that failed to do this and what happened to them. Thanks for watching.